jeg fornøjelsen af at introducere vores første international speaker. Annica, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
All right. Brilliant. Good morning, Annica. And I would just like to thank you on behalf of the organizers for joining us here today. We're so happy that you can be with us. Annica, of course, skal jeg lige sige til salen her, arbejder jo som præsident og CEO for en fuldstændig unik virksomhed. Og grunden til, at hun får ordet nu, grunden til, at hun får ordet her om et øjeblik, det er jo, at hun og hendes virksomhed sidder, kan man roligt sige, i mere end én brudflade, når det gælder nogle af de allerstørste temaer, som vi skal diskutere. Annica, I've just told the audience about your company and just how central it is really to some of the dilemmas that we are debating here today. That's why we've called you up, and that's why we are looking forward to hearing about your experiences. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a true pleasure to be invited here today and have a chance to speak to you. And it's clear, I think, for every one of us that we have several environmental crises going on. Climate change is one, biodiversity is another. And today, we really don't know how to create the service and the jobs and the opportunities for soon to be 10 billion people without accelerating environmental degradation. And this is a huge challenge for all of us business leaders as well as societies and politicians, that we don't have too much time to solve these issues. We're already exceeding the ecological capacity of our planet. And at the same time, we do see all the geopolitical pressures, the social pressures when we overutilize the natural resources that we have, also driving a lot of the issues that we see with geopolitics today. And we see global inequality and inequity increasing, and this adds on to the pressures that we already have from an ecological perspective. So I guess we all understand the depth and the urgency, and it calls for really crisis and urgent action taking place now in the coming 10 years to turn this around. And this is, of course, a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity to transform and create resilient societies and companies where we adapt to this new reality. And it does give opportunities for companies that take this seriously and drive a responsible leadership to prevent this crisis, but also to create thriving businesses and societies for the future. So we are here in this room, we have great power to make this change and this transformation a reality. And this is a few things that I would like to kind of touch upon in my presentation. So if we flip to the next slide, please, a few words about who we are in Stora Enso and what we do. Next slide. Stora Enso is the renewable materials company. We are a leading provider of renewable products in packaging, biomaterials, wooden construction. And on top of that, we are one of the leading companies as private forest owners in the world. So we have a huge responsibility here in managing both of the material and the product streams that we have, but also growing forests and the biodiversity in the forests. We believe that everything that's made from fossil-based materials today can be made from a tree tomorrow. And in this sense, this is what's driving our innovation agenda. And as you can understand, sustainability and responsible business practices is deeply ingrained and embedded in the whole strategy of our company. Our oldest parts of the company were funded 750 years ago. So we have been around for quite some time and been able to drive transformation over the centuries. And if I talk a few words about our products, they are low carbon, they are fiber-based, renewable and recyclable. And these are solutions that are there to kind of solve some of the challenges that we see in climate change. And through our products and business, we can also promote positive impacts on the environment, enabling our customers and our partners to become more eco-friendly. And totally, we are 22,000 people that are truly committed to our purpose and values to lead and to do good for people and planet. So moving to the next slide, if we zoom out a little bit on our global challenges, next slide, please. From a kind of science perspective, we are all aware that the planetary boundaries are being crossed. Planetary boundaries is, as you may well know, a scientific concept where the different aspects of specific environmental processes have been defined, and the scientific community has agreed upon seeing how is the human activity impacting these different processes, and are we within a safe space of operating. And if we are in a safe space of operating, it means that we can also forward a future for the new generations where they can thrive and be prosperous on this planet. But it also tells that if we fail to operate within these 9 planetary boundaries, it will lead to irreversible damage to the planet, and it will kind of threaten the existence not only of humankind, but also all the other species in our world, our own well-being, and also ultimately the businesses that we represent. And it's quite saddening to see that the latest kind of publication in 2022 reveals that today 6 of these planetary boundaries have been crossed, and we are pushing to the limits of the other ones as well. And this is due to the production and consumption system that we have on our planet currently. For business, these kind of planetary boundaries are sort of a compass where you can see how your own business is contributing or not contributing positively or negatively to these boundaries. And it is also a way to track and trace if your business activities get us in a good place or not. Out of these 9 boundaries, climate change is of course the most imminent. We have known this problem for decades now. We know that with the trajectory that we have today, we are ending up at 3 degrees of climate or temperature change, and the gap to the 1.5 degree kind of limit or threshold where we want to be, we are quite far away from reaching that. Another important boundary here is the biodiversity boundary, which traditionally have been looked upon that it's how we are impacting on biodiversity, but more and more becomes about the impacts that loss of biodiversity has on humanity and the society. So it's the impact on us as well. Next slide, please. So I think we all understand that transformative change is needed, and often in the news, one system is debated more, and it's the energy system, breaking free from fossil dependency and changing to renewable energy. I will not talk about that. I will focus my presentation on the transformation needed within another system that is also crucial in order for us to stay within the planetary boundaries. And that is the materials and products system. We see that unless we are sure to have the resources that humanity need and that they are in a renewable space and that we can make sure that we don't waste the resources we have, it will drive geopolitical and social difficulties around the world. So therefore we need to transform not only the energy system, but also the material system. And it has to go in a direction where material becomes precious from the sense that it is used as efficiently as humanly possible, that it is circular, that we create no waste, and a closed loop production system becomes the mainstream, and that single-use business cannot be the model of operation. Fast consumption, linear consumption, and then waste. But in order to succeed with this challenge, of course, it is all about how we work across the value chains and with customers, with suppliers, how governments and policymakers are stepping up to this challenge to promote kind of the systems that we want to see, and how science supports with data-driven kind of understanding of what are the best choices for the future. If we move to next slide, please. So if we look now at business and what does it mean for us is that to manage this change and this transformation, the business critical processes have to have these aspects ingrained in them. So for instance, the product and innovation scorecards need to take climate change and biodiversity and material system kind of efficiency and transformation into account. The same goes in how we spend our investments and our capexes. Which businesses do we promote, and which perhaps parts of our businesses are not future-proof? It goes to M&A and strategy review. It also goes at what we promote and award and reward in our short-term incentive systems and long-term incentive systems. And if you manage as a business to kind of put this in your scorecards, this will engage the people in the organization and get the transformation kind of done. And it also needs to interlink with the suppliers and partners in the value chain. So aligning this and working together with the ambitious companies that want to drive transformation is also key to make it a reality. Next slide, please. So our responsibility and kind of commitment to this is that it requires a new type of metrics that in many cases override financial metrics and are kind of a hygiene factor in order to even consider investing in a business or putting a new market on or a new product on the market. So if we move to next slide, please. So we set out our transformation journey by defining which spaces in our company we want to focus on. We communicated it last October and involved widely our organization in this journey. Our goal as a company is to be 100% regenerative by 2050. And 2050 might sound far away, but if you are to transform kind of your company, you have to break that down into annual milestones and milestones until 2030 and so on and so forth, and actions that are kind of following, tracking and tracing the progress. 100% regenerative for us means that first of all, we stay within kind of the science-based targets for climate change and have our carbon roadmap, that our products are 100% circular and net carbon and biodiversity positive. And this means at a product level that they contribute positively to nature restoration and climate change mitigation. At the same time, make sure that the well-being of people in the societies where we operate is taken into account from an equity perspective. We have chosen to take a long-term view because it's important for us from two perspectives. It means that we can constantly then push our innovation agenda and define where we are today as a starting point, but also where we want to be. And this gives time to also do the transition in the asset base or the footprint that we have in our product setup. It also enables us to secure that we are not being disrupted by other competing materials. And secondly, it positions us as a relevant conversational partner when we shape new systems. And this is kind of the proactive approach we need to have in order to ensure that the materials are used in the best possible way and making sure that our whole economy on the planet becomes regenerative. Next slide, please. So if we look at these kind of principles for our sustainability foundation to make sure that we decrease our carbon footprint and in scope 1, 2, and 3, and also 100% our products are recyclable by 2030 and positive from a biodiversity perspective, it means that we've also made clear selections on where we see that we have the best opportunities from our product portfolio to grow. And if we look at now the product portfolio we are focusing on now is to make sure that our packaging meets the expectations of being circular. It means replacing a lot of plastics out there that's hard to, that's fossil based and also hard to recirculate, reducing waste and so on, and driving these circular solutions with biodegradable options, with recyclable options, with reusable options. And we believe there is a strong demand here from brand owners and consumers, and we see that also in regulation in this perspective. Within the other area, wooden building solutions, we see a growth of more than 10% on a market where we have a leading global role. It is about high-rise buildings. For instance, Google head office in London is built in wood. In Singapore, the campus of the university is built on wood, and we see more and more of these initiatives where the wooden material is used as a perfect carbon sink and reducing the total carbon footprint of construction. And construction is really important to revolutionize because all in all, construction activities stand for 40% of CO2 emissions totally, and materials used in construction industry stand for 10% of the CO2 footprints that we have. So there is a huge need to transform that sector. And then there is another area that we're putting focus in, and which is in biomaterials innovations, where, for instance, we have opportunities to replace materials used in batteries for electrification of vehicles or energy storage systems with products that are renewable and are not finite, that is, and can help the transformation of the electrification sector. So these are the three areas from a product perspective that we focus on. And if we look now, the framework that I presented before about biodiversity, where we have defined 30 biodiversity indicators, the circular solutions and the CO2 footprint, they are all linked now to all the innovation activities that drive our growth in these three areas. And as you can see, many of them are high margin areas. So there is really no contradiction between business opportunities and the sustainability aspect. Next slide, please. So we are not able to do this alone. Innovation does not happen in isolation or in a silo. It requires quite a lot of collaboration across our businesses. And here you can see some of the examples where we are engaging with our customers or partners to drive that change. What's really fun is that our people are really committed to this. So they see this as part of their day-to-day activities in every conversation that we have with our customers to drive in this direction. And we also choose our customers in order to make sure that we are aligned in this vision of driving this transformation. One example here is, for instance, the collaboration with Piccadilly that we started the other year. If we move to next slide, please. So a few words now about the necessity of innovation and disrupting your kind of current business. I can bring up an example of forestry, for instance, which has for hundreds of years been quite kind of basic. It's about harvesting when the tree has grown maturity, using the wood for products, and then planting 3 new trees for every tree that's harvested. The last 100 years in the Nordics, we have focused on growth. So how do we get forests to grow better and to be more storing more CO2, and thus only harvesting from the growth. Now we move into digitalizing our forests and using data management from geographical information systems, from climate databases, to make sure that we can track and trace not only how forest is growing over the 120 years period from plant to full-grown tree, but also to make sure that we drive positive biodiversity practices, or that our harvesting practices promote as much carbon storage as possible until we then, at end of life of the tree, we use it in products that are long-lived, that also then continue storing the carbon that the trees have absorbed, and then the cycle begins again. Yeah. So with that, if we move to the next and final slide, I would just say that what this demands from leadership is courage, responsible leadership, and it demands involvement of all the people in the organization on this journey. And what I've seen at least is that this ignites people, it gets people passionate, and it becomes part of their day-to-day operations. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today.
Annica, let me ask you, Just a couple of questions here. It's been mentioned already, of course, that now the world is facing at least a certain amount of economic uncertainty. What might be a little more serious than that, it could be a real downturn in the world economy. Are you worried what the customers are going to say? Are you worried looking, 6 months, 12 months ahead, that you will find customers saying, look, this is not the time. This is not the time for greater ambitions in this area, sustainability and so forth. Really, we need to focus on the bottom line.
I have personally not seen that. I think every business out there today, even though we are under extreme pressure from different geopolitics and so on, there are many business leaders that understand that we need also to have the long-term view. And the business resilience is important. So how we get materials, for instance, is crucial. And it's a short-term question and it's a long-term question. So I think we are able to have both these realities at mind. At the same time, there are going to be businesses that do not have a sustainable business model that will go under. And this is kind of the natural kind of reality of businesses. But I think we can handle both.
Speaking of the long term, of course, you represent a company that can trace its history. I think it's 700 years back, right? And when you look at the global market today, and it is a new global market, of course, building on the last 3 decades of globalization or so, is it the same? I mean, what you've just described in terms of your consumers, of your customers, are you hearing the same kind of signals around the world, or will we see, Europe, maybe the US, a few other places leading on this, while China and India will say, well, we simply can't afford to be that ambitious?
I think we are in different maturity levels, but at the end of the day, pollution and waste and climate change is hitting globally. I think there is India, for instance, has experienced 60 degrees Celsius temperature, water droughts. We see the pollution in Asia from materials that end up in the rivers and in the seas. So whether or not we like it, we will have to deal with these things. And I think that we need to make sure that this world is also operating on the global scale, and that we can find solutions where countries like India need to raise their populations from poverty, and the Western world needs to be better at not exporting models that are not really functioning. That's why these transformation of material system and energy systems need to happen. Of course, there are backlashes. It's really unfortunate that we have the Russian war on Ukraine going down now, that we have kind of the pandemics, because it has created this kind of short term, we have to handle this right now. But I'm also confident that we will have to get back on the long-term view sooner rather than later, because it needs to happen at the same time.
All right, final question, brief question, just a brief answer here, and just Annica to have a point that we can keep with us and take on to the next panel. What is the most important thing that you personally have learned from this? I mean, how has, even in the last few months, changed you as a leader, as an executive?
It is about being kind of grounded in your own values, and when you come into tricky situations to make a decision, if you go back to what is the value that you stand for, then the decisions are quite easy. And I can take an example. We decided to step out of Russian operations quite quickly, and we made it happen quite quickly because we couldn't live with the values that we saw in that. If you have your Northern Star in terms of the values that you represent and the purpose that you're driving in your company, you will also be able to execute quickly. And this, I think, is one of the key learnings. Thank you.
All right. Annica, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.